welcome along to the next edition of The Landlord Lens, and welcome to everybody here at the Property Investor Show, because we're actually recording this edition with a live audience. Very exciting. And the Landlord Lens is a collaboration between Property Tribes, of which I am the co-founder and also a full-time residential landlord, and the NRLA. And my partner in crime for this is Ben Beadle, who is CEO of the NRLA. And Ben, we're really quite excited to be doing it like this, aren't we?
I have to say, Vanessa, it's great to be back in a room full of people. I'm glad I've remembered to wear a pair of trousers, because normally when I do this, I'm amongst friends, so I feel I can share that with you, but I'm normally trouserless. But no, it's great. It's great to be back doing what we do best, and we're a people business, right? So we've missed all this. So.
Right. We're in a room full of landlords. How wonderful. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for coming this morning. Now, Ben, our collaboration, you and I came up with this about 18 months ago now, I think it was, and we've really grown our audience. And essentially, we decided that we would look at the trending topics on Property Tribes, and there's a screenshot up there of the Property Tribes forum, and on the left-hand side you will see the trending discussions silo. And what that is it is a little algorithm in the background of Property Tribes that sorts all the discussions based on how many people are commenting, how many people are viewing, how much engagement the discussion is getting. And that updates about every 3 hours throughout the day and throughout the week. And Ben and I really like the idea of looking at the trending topics, because they are always of the most interest to the community. So very often you'll see big things trending on Twitter because everybody's interested in it. So we decided we would look at the trending topics on the day and then pick a few to talk about. So I think first of all, Ben, interesting, just a couple of days ago we learnt that a student of a well-known training company who had been trained in the strategy of rent-to-rent and rent-to-rent serviced accommodation, despite saying last summer that he was doing phenomenally well, that he had employed hundreds of staff, he had hundreds of units under his administration, he's gone bust for 1.5 million, and a lot of his creditors are some of the people that he met on the training course within the training network that he was in. I think there's over 120 small investors and businesses as creditors. Now, you and I do tend to talk about this quite often, don't we? Because it comes up a lot. Rent to rent, what's your view on it?
Well, Vanessa, I think this is, in a way, the industry's dirty little secret, if I'm honest with you. You know, rent-to-rent done well can work well, right? But the trouble is, we see time and time again things like this, dreadful episode where, people have gone into investing with the right sort of intentions and unfortunately chosen a bad egg, it would seem. And I think for me, this is one area that is ripe for greater scrutiny and greater regulation. To be honest with you, because it's not a problem all of the time, but wherever there's a big problem, it normally points back to rent, right? And rent to rent done very, very badly. And what I would say to those folk that are looking at things like this, don't believe all of the rhetoric and all of the nonsense that you hear, because actually when we look back, we can frankly the bullshitometer of things that were coming out was frankly too good to be true. And if it is too good to be true, invariably it's probably best to do something else. So we can look back with hindsight, but we do report on these things and talk about these things quite a lot, and there must be an attraction. There must be, what's the draw to these people? I don't know. I haven't got the answer, but all I know is that it's rent to rent is an area I find slightly odd, and for me as an investor, I much prefer just to be able to rent my own properties myself, know who's in my properties and look after them, etc., etc. I don't need that kind of weird intermediary. I get that some people do it well and do it right and do it well, but frankly, it's really not for me.
I think, the issue that I have with rent to rent is that it's touted as a no money down strategy. And I think that's exceedingly misleading, because in any aspect of property, you do need cash reserves. you know, there's things cropping up all the time. There's compliance, there's repairs, there's maintenance. It's never ending. Sometimes, you know, I had 3 boilers go in a month. That's you know, like £1,500 per boiler. And people who are doing rent to rent, they're attracted to it because it's sold as a no money down strategy. And well, first of all, there's just so many things wrong with that. I think the first hurdle is obviously that if they go through a letting agent to try and get a property, they're going to find that there's an affordability problem. Because if you've already got your own mortgage and you're renting another property, then you go to an agent to say, okay, well, I want multiple properties. They're going to say, well, how are you going to afford it? How are you going to be guaranteeing the rent? And quite frankly, the guarantee, unless you've got very significant funds behind you, is absolutely worthless. So the landlord needs to be aware that the guarantee might be worthless. And let's say you do actually get control of a property, then you've got to set it up correctly. And you know, if you're doing serviced accommodation, you've got to kit it out down to the last teaspoon. A friend of mine actually does rent to rent legitimately and ethically in London, and he does not expect to break even until year 2. So the profit or the income from the first year is used up solely in setting up the property correctly. So I object strongly to rent to rent being touted as this no money down strategy. It's not, and I think people get involved, and I think with this gentleman that we're talking about today, Ben Brand, I think he scaled up too quickly, and I think there is you know, perhaps people do, I guess, scale up too quickly and they're not actually experienced enough to deal with it.
Yes, and I should say that not to be confused with other people with the same initials, this particular gentleman. But yeah, I think you got there in the end. Yeah, no, I think that's right, Vanessa. And I think, yeah, to me, I just find it. I just find it really, really weird, as you say, the whole affordability thing. As landlords, we want to know that if that someone's going to be good for the property, right? That they're going to be able to afford their obligations. If you're doing that multiple times over, then obviously, if things go Pete Tong, you're not really going to have any recourse. But the other thing I object to, and I get this, I've been getting this a lot at the moment, is rent-to-rent operators using HMO licence lists to target me and write to me, to get my properties. I mean, they obviously end up in the recycling, not the bin, but the recycling. But yeah, I just think if there's one takeaway from this sorry story is, honestly, I'd avoid it like I don't know what the phrase is, but avoid it like the plague. If things are too good to be true, invariably they are. And I think for me, I'm a traditional landlord in a way. I want to know what's going on with my properties. I want to know what's happening with my tenants. I don't like the idea of almost a pyramid scheme when it comes to to rent. Who is the end tenant? Is it an AST? Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? Oh God, I need an easy life. I'm a simple guy at the end of the day, and I cannot cope with this level of complexity, because invariably it ends in tears, as it has in this instance, and out of pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting you say about the letters that people are sending out, soliciting. They've been told by these training courses to look for a tired landlord who doesn't want to manage their property anymore. And they very often are told to go direct to landlords precisely to avoid letting agents, because letting agents are kind of gatekeepers, aren't they? Yeah. So they're told to go direct to landlord. Now, it's interesting, Ben, because just this week, the ASA, the Advertising Standards Authority, has ruled that to send these unsolicited letters to landlords is illegal because of bypassing estate agents, and also a lot of these letters are going to people who have opted out of direct mail. So they have ignored these submissions, as it's called, for not to receive direct mail. So what I'm trying to say, Ben, is in property, the devil is always in the detail. And when you go on these training courses, they just give you headlines of you're going to earn £1,000 per month per property. You're not. I've been a landlord, and you have, Ben, as well. We've been landlords for over 20 years each, and we know how hard and how expensive it is to run a property. And if you've got control of multiple properties and you've got to do repairs, maintenance, or you've got voids, well, first of all, you've got to have experience of managing a property, but you've got to have significant cash reserves in the background to cover all of that, haven't you?
You have, you've got to save for a rainy day. You've got to make sure that I tend to keep a year in the bank back just in case, to be honest with you, because as you say, things happen in threes, right? Your three boilers, and these things add up. And the one thing I want to make sure that I can always do is to be really, really responsive as far as repairs. Not least because of my people remind me of my position, and we'll probably go to the media if I didn't get things sorted out, immediately. But also, I wouldn't want to be in that position. I want to be covering all of my bases and offering people a decent level of service. And I think, this isn't always about the. I don't think there is such thing as a quick buck in this game now anymore. I think those days are long since over. I think what we're in for is really a consistent income for when we're grey and old and decrepit, and a capital appreciation to pass on, or to go on a cruise or whatever it is that we're meant to do when we're very old. So for me, this is the long game. And in between, we've got a responsibility to make sure that we dot the I's and cross the T's, and offer our customers a really good place to stay, safe, legal and secure, and all of that. And to dial back to the rent-to-rent situation, I just think you put yourself at a huge risk, you put your customers at a huge risk, and for what? And I have to say, I do take issue with those suppliers using the HMO registers, because it's an absolutely outrageous breach of what the list is there for, and it's why I worry a little bit about things like landlord registration, etc. We need to make sure that we've got robust control over that data, and frankly, that's not the right sort of individual to go trawling through that sort of data. Now, of course, I open it, I stick it in the bin, no harm done. But again, that data is not there for that purpose. If I was less busy, I could be one of those perennial moaners with the local authority and waste a lot of time whinging about it. But data is really, really important in this sector, and I think I'm not really very, I don't think that's an appropriate way to use a HMO licensing scheme. HMO licenses are there, in theory, to raise standards, right? They're not there to give people a quick route to a customer base. So I get down off my soapbox now.
Oh, well, that's what we're here for, to be on our soapbox, isn't it? I think if you do get a coloured envelope through your door, if you're a landlord here today, it will almost certainly be from somebody that's fresh off a course, that has no experience, and is promising to guarantee the rent on your property. That guarantee, I'm almost certain, will be completely invalid, and should you go and check them on Companies House, which you should do as part of your due diligence, you will almost certainly find that their company was set up in the last few months, and they're actually not in a position to guarantee your rent. So if you're a landlord, I strongly advise you to avoid those coloured envelopes and recycle them. Just as we finish off this topic, what's interesting is that this young man who has gone bust for 1.5 million, he's still on Facebook soliciting deals and trying to get money off investors for his developments, and I think that's utterly shocking. If he had overstretched himself, he could have actually said, yes, I hold my hands up, I've overstretched myself, I realise that I've let people down, I'm going to go away and see what I can do to make amends. But no, he's carrying on business as usual, and this again highlights the complete lack of regulation of the wealth creation industry, and people are only finding out about these kind of things from the content on Property Tribes. We've had another one, actually, JVIP, another company that was very much within these training networks. They've gone bust, I think, for 17 million, and people have lost their pensions, their entire pension pot. And these people were still soliciting money even though they knew they were going to go bust. And they can do it because they know there's no regulation.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all make mistakes in life, don't we? Sometimes it's best to hold our hands up and try and put it right. But clearly, that's not the case with these particular entities, and I think it does just reinforce that it all sounds a little bit murky to me. And frankly, move on, do something else. Deal with things the old-fashioned way would would be my honest assessment of the situation.
Yeah, indeed. Well, that's our first topic. What should we talk about next, Ben? I would say just generally EPC ratings are very high on landlords' agenda at the moment. If we think that tenancy deposit protection came in 2012 and there are still some landlords that don't know about it. I remember actually standing with you on a stand and a gentleman, this was about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe no more than that because of COVID, maybe 4 years ago, a gentleman came up to you and said, I've got 40 properties, and you somehow got onto the topic and said, where do you protect your deposits? And he said, what? What are you talking about? What do you mean deposit protection? And you and I were like, oh my God, that's quite frightening. And I think this is the same with the EPC. I think landlords are sleepwalking towards big problems if they're not now thinking about the energy efficiency of their properties.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Vanessa. But the one thing I would also add in there when it comes to energy is the government needs to make its mind up, because we have been promised since October an energy paper about the direction of travel. There's been a consultation out saying what the preferred formula is, EPCC by 2025 and existing tenancies by 2028 with a 10,000 cap. That's been deferred month on month. It's now the 1st of April. We were expecting, the last date that we had was yesterday for that sort of announcement. And so I think it's right that landlords read the room when it comes to energy, right? We all want our kids to kind of live in a better world and less pollution and all of that sort of stuff, in 50 years' time when I'm 6 foot under. But if we want to get to that particular point, the government has got to come out to the sector and say, if we're picking on you, these are going to be the rules of the game. Now, I actually take great comfort that the government is dragging its feet because we did quite a bit of research about this around retrofit heat pumps. And the reality is, folks, things have moved on since October. We've got a war in Ukraine. The cost of living is on the up and it's going through the roof. And actually, the reality is on things like heat pumps, A, they cost a lot more to buy, and B, they cost a lot more to run. And who pays for them to run? Well, typically your average tenant. Energy bills are going up, and so I think government is having a long, hard think about the direction of travel. And what I would hate for landlords to do is to follow what they think the direction of travel is, only to to have the rug pulled from under them and say, well, actually, folks, stick with your combi boiler for a little bit longer. And I think that's the reality of the discussions that are taking place at the moment. And I'm amongst friends, so I met with Eddie Hughes, the Undersecretary Minister for Housing, and said to Eddie that actually I see a lot of comments about uncertainty about EPCC and the 10 grand cap. And I think some landlords are actually taking decisions now because they are worried about where this is going to end up. And the best thing that government could do, we'd all understand it. There's absolutely terrible things going out in the world. I wonder whether or not we just need to take stock before we rush into something and say, well, maybe we're going to give it a year before we come out and announce the direction of travel, because I don't think the case is fully made for heat pumps, if I'm honest with you. I don't think the case is made on the underlying measurement of EPC. Between you, me and the gatepost, it's an absolute crock of rubbish. When you think about how EPCs are actually calculated, they make no logical sense. And again, I can sense myself getting on my soapbox. I shall wrap up briefly, but I've got 2 flats in the same block. Exactly the same.
I know what you're going to say.
I've got one that's E and I've got one that's C. Well, why the chuffing hell is that? Why can't anybody tell me why that is? So I do think we've got some fundamental issues to resolve when it comes to energy. We are not against the direction of travel. We will not be the blockers on this. But I don't want to tell you folk to go out and buy heat pumps if the government are going to change tack. So I think the government needs to. I know they've got a difficult gig at the moment. I get that. But these are really, really pressing issues. And I think the reality is that some landlords are thinking, don't want that 10k cap. I'm gonna cash my chips in. And you've seen our stuff hopefully on supply and the direction of travel. What does that mean? Fewer homes available for people, more expensive, and that's really not what the government wants. So I think the research that we did very briefly highlighted that the PRS has the most significantly difficult homes to be able to bring up to rating, but also that space-wise and amenity-wise, if you've got people in there, it's really bloody difficult to retrofit. And so these are really, really pressing issues that I think we need to see a proper strategy on. Now, I take great comfort that government have looked at some of our research and looked at some of the things that they've said, that we've said, and actually haven't come out yet with a direction of travel. Because hopefully, to me, that means that someone's having a little think somewhere.
Oh, I hope so. Well, you and I often talk on the Landlord Lens of how a lot of government policy has just actually backfired so badly, and actually just constantly, actually made the supply of private sector homes less and less and less and less, which is obviously pushing up rents, as we know, and there's really significant supply and demand imbalance going on at the moment as we speak today. It's as I was talking to, I'm going to drop a name here, Clang, excuse me. I was talking to Ian Duncan Smith at another event a few years ago, and I said to him, he's actually very anti-Section 24, which is the topic we're about to go on to. And I said to him, what do you think of Section 24? And he said, too many people in government meddling and tweaking different levers without understanding the effect that it's having over there, kind of thing. And I think he's absolutely right. And everything that this government is doing, yes, they do want to curb private landlords on how many properties they can acquire and so on, but it's actually having such a bad impact on the whole sector when private sector homes are so desperately needed, and this whole supply demand issue is just getting worse and worse and worse. And again, with Section 24, which is now our next topic, again, this was rolled out 6 years ago now, and we're starting to feel the impact of that. We've got a trending topic on Property Tribes. One landlord, higher rate taxpayer, her tax liability has doubled now because of Section 24, and she's seriously thinking of cashing in her chips, to use your expression. Many older landlords who were thinking of maybe retiring 5 or 10 years, they're thinking, actually, I've had enough, I'm going to cash out now. So Section 24 is still a major issue for landlords, isn't it? And it's so hard to know what is right tax strategy, because it's so personal to the individual, isn't it?
It is, and the one thing I would say about Section 24, and this is backed up by the National Audit Office findings, who found that government have no strategy for the private rented sector, and simply move from whacking one mole to whacking another one. Now, I hope that the rental reform bill will go some way to stitch that patchwork quilt together a little better. But the reality is about Section 24, they did it to cool the market. But what has it done? It's forced a lot of landlords to think about short-term holiday lets, Airbnbs, and so weirdly the government has not only reduced the net supply of long-term affordable renting, they've made it more costly. And they've incentivised the sort of stag party, hen do. I've been on lots of them. They're great. They're great for a weekend, aren't they? But they're not great for the community feel. And then as a result, you get pockets of the country where you've got a lot of people coming and going, people not necessarily contributing to to the community feel, and people then getting frustrated about landlords who, as I remind ministers, are very agile. If you're going to cut something off over here, but leave that over there and incentivise something completely ridiculous, then of course people are going to look at it, because Section 24 is the most disgraceful and discriminatory policy when it comes to individual landlords. I mean, it really is as simple as that, because in what industry can you not offset your costs? And I think it is. We're in a hostile environment, Vanessa. We must remember that. Everybody hates us. I mean, literally everybody hates us. And I can't put it any more plainly than that. But we have to remember who is providing homes. We have to remember that we have very high satisfaction in the sector. Yes, of course, we can always do better, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I worry that with things like taxation, with things like energy, and you throw in a sprinkling of rental reform in there and make it a bit more difficult, of course, people are going to think about other types of investments and cashing them in. And that would be fine if we had, surpluses of homes that, people could move to. And as a result, people will be serving Section 21 notices. And then people will be complaining about getting a Section 21 notice. And government wonder, well, why the hell are landlords giving Section 21 notice? What awful people, not giving a reason. And then you spiral out of control. And then the next thing that will happen will be rent controls and rent caps, and to try and push down the cost of housing. Whereas actually, if we took a step back and recognised that there is a role for the responsible landlord in providing homes, and there should be a fair tax environment. And there should be support for homeowners to be able to bring their properties up and contribute towards government aspirations within the right regulatory framework within which tenants can feel safe. But the reality is now the private rented sector has become jack of all trades. And 10, 15 years ago, it was predominantly students, sharers, people moving around. But now we've got families, we've got older people. And, if you're a family and your kid's going to school and you get a Section 21 notice, well, that's going to really, stuff you up, isn't it? And so the sector is being asked to do things it was never set up to do. And all of these contributory factors are underpinned by a lack of a cohesive strategy, which the National Audit Office called the government out on earlier this year.
Good. Oh, well, good for them. I'm going to just put you on the spot here now, Ben, before we go to questions. This is a moral dilemma, and I think we might actually introduce this into the landlord lens. My lovely husband Nick there on the camera, you may have seen him on ITV this morning and BBC News. He's been in Ukraine helping the pet rescue issue, and he's raised 125,000 to rescue pets out of Ukraine. But he's become a kind of magnet for anything to do with Ukraine. And somebody contacted him via Facebook and said they had been received notice from their landlord because their landlord wanted to house Ukrainian refugees. Now that's a bit of a moral dilemma, isn't it?
Ooh, put me on the spot there, Vanessa. Yes, well, this just goes to show I don't know the topics or the questions that we're going to get asked.
It's a laudable thing to want to do, but if you've got a perfectly good tenant, is that fair?
So I think what I would say there is that maybe there's a role for. If the tenant was wanting to maybe use one of the rooms and benefit from the £350 sponsorship fee, that could work. It is a really tricky one, right? I don't know personally that I would want to interrupt my tenancy. But maybe I'm a mean and horrible person. I don't know. I think I would probably let sleeping dogs lie, to be honest with you, and try and help in some other way. But it's it's a really tricky one. I'm not in the position of having sort of empty properties where I'm offering them about, but. Yeah, I do. I would not like to be on the receiving end of that notice. Put it that way.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, to have a very happy tenancy, being paid on time, looked after the property, and then be told that you've had a Section 21. I mean, when I was in rented accommodation when I was in my early 20s, that was something that we feared if we were in a happy environment. You didn't want to receive that, and I think there's many moral dilemmas that landlords face on a daily basis, isn't there? And I think you and I are all about trying to encourage best practice and education, and if in doubt, reach out to other landlords. That's the beauty of Property Tribes. It's a community of over 70,000 landlords, so you can tap into 70,000 other people's experiences, see what they think. But yes, it's certainly a tricky one, isn't it?
It is, Vanessa, and I think the one thing I would say when it comes to Ukraine and the Afghan resettlement scheme, let's not forget about two in short space of time, right? I think what I would be encouraging property owners to do is to be as compassionate as they can be, and let's not forget that again. The government is leaning on landlords, to come to the fore. So it's helpful to show that we can be trusted and do the right sort of thing. And the irony is not lost on me that government is leaning on us to help in these situations.
Okay. Well, I'm just mindful of the time. So those were our kind of topics that we were covering today. We'd be interested to know if anybody in the audience has their own trending topic, something that's really on their mind, something that's causing them pain in their landlord life, or maybe you'd like to comment on some of the things that Ben and I have discussed this morning. Has anybody got anything they'd like to say? Lady there in pink.
Similar to the topic that you raised earlier about rent to rent, things going wrong, but there's also now a lot of letters that we get as landlords to, for people who are finding homes for the local authority.
Mm-hmm.
So things are shifting now again to the private landlords through these agencies. And I just wondered whether that is also probably everywhere.
Do you mean the local authority looking to guarantee the rent to a landlord?
Other agencies on their behalf.
Okay.
Like capital letters, for example.
Oh, yes. Well,
So it's just, are there any dangers in that?
Want to take that one? Yeah, so I think Capital Letters are a good outfit. We work very closely with them. I think anything that can help landlords navigate their way through the myriad and complexity and nonsense of local authorities has to be a good thing. And people like Capital Letters will do that and be quite helpful to landlords. So I would have no problem with that. I would see that as being an area, dare I say it, that you could go into with confidence. But obviously the local authority renting works in a slightly different way. You have to get used to universal credit, housing benefit, paid in arrears, 5-week wait. So it's a slightly different ball game. But organisations like Capital Letters, in my view, do a good job to help landlords and make the bridge with the local authority.
definitely. Gentleman there.
You talk to a lot of ministers, Ben. I wonder about you actually talking to a Labour minister, because a couple of years, talk about down the track, 2 years' time, quite likely to have a Labour government. Every week I'm hearing Rachel Reeves talking about hitting landlords.
Yeah.
Let shareholders shares. It looks like he's going to get a far lot worse if you get a Labour government.
Yeah. Gentleman asked if you talked to actually any of the Labour ministers, and I think that's a very interesting question, because after the spring statement, Rachel Reeves actually did bring up buy-to-let landlords and said they should be hammered even more. And we could have a Labour government next time around.
God help us, that's all I'll say. To answer the question directly, I met with Matthew Pennycook last week, who's the Shadow Housing Minister for Labour. Very nice chap, very live to the issues. I did pull him up around the rhetoric that his party uses. It's cheap, to be honest with you. It is cheap because, as I will comment on when Rachel Reeves, it's not the first time she's said it actually, and Keir Starmer has said it as well. It may not be in the context of national insurance relevant, but we've just been hammered by Section 24. We've lost wear and tear allowances. Landlords pay their way. They may not pay it in quite the same way that a PAYE individual does, but we pay our way. And the research that we're doing at the moment, sir, with Capital Economics is looking at the contribution that landlords make to the economy, to society, aside from the homes that they provide. So strategically, I agree with you, and that's why we've had an initial meeting with Matthew to see where there are alignments. And we know that there'll probably be plenty of disagreements, but the NRLA is an organisation that can do business with the Labour Party, but we do need to make sure that that language is not helpful. And to go a step further, it is part of the problem at the moment, because you look at the the Conservative government, and you think, well, these guys should be on our side, and they're coming out with all of this stuff, and you think, well, I'll vote them out next time, and then you think, well, who the hell am I going to vote for? Because the immediate alternative is not a great deal better. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place. But strategically, we are working with the Labour Party. They've not. What I was pushing him on, Corbyn had a commitment to rent controls in his manifesto, and I've asked whether they will be reviewing that, because obviously our position on rent control, and I think we're really trying to influence the agenda with the Labour Party with one eye on whenever the election may be. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
So-
I'm pushing for rent controls in London. Yeah.
So again, remember, this is posturing. So Sadiq Khan cannot bring in rent controls unless Boris Johnson gives him the permission to do so. Well, dare I say it, I don't think that's going to happen. And so when the mayor comes out bleating on about rent control this and rent control that, it really is a bit disingenuous, to be honest with you, because people will look at that and think, well, right, I'll vote for that if I'm a 20-year-old renter that's paying a lot of their money towards rent. But the reality is he cannot do it, and there's a process that has to be gone through, and I can't see that that's going to happen anytime soon. And the other thing I should say, I was on the select committee a few weeks ago where the permanent secretary, Jeremy Pocklington at Levelling Up, also said there were no plans for rent control. So people talk about it because it's politically attractive. Yeah, it's a crowd pleaser. At the moment, and long may it continue, there are no plans.
Good. Excellent. Time for one question. Was there anybody over this side of the room? Gentleman there?
Just building on the EPC that you were talking about, a lot of, particularly in East London and around the country, a lot of the local authority blocks, etc., are Ds with no hope of getting to C without doing external. I think we won't go there.
Yes.
Just wondering how that interacts with plans on EPC.
Okay, yes. So, gentlemen, just asking how local authorities are going to deliver EPC when they've got very low quality housing, particularly in the area of London we're in.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you hit on one of the difficulties, and we all would like our homes to be as energy performant as possible, to keep the bills down. But there is the reality that once you've done your low-level lighting and loft insulation, you've done the easy bits. Actually, everything else is really bloody expensive, and if you've got significant portfolios, you are going to need a bit more time to be able to do those sorts of things. So I think that this is one of the areas that government is thinking about at the moment. I think they've got certainly one eye on the energy crisis, but they're also, there's lots of funny messages coming out about, the role of gas boilers and heat pumps and different technologies, and it feels to me that there's still a bit of bun fighting going on about the direction of travel. We're all going to be in the same boat. All my properties are a D. Actually, honestly, I'm hanging fire until I know what the direction of travel is. I know what I'll need to do roughly, but I'm not gonna do it. And in fact, probably, dare I say it, I'll probably rush out the day before and buy a brand new gas boiler and buy all of the spares possible so I can keep it going for 50 years, because I don't think they're going to make us rip out perfectly operable gas boilers. So we'll see. It's still to be determined.
But you could always go out and put a wind turbine in your garden.
Neighbours would love that, wouldn't they?
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us today on the Landlord Lens for April. We really appreciate you coming here this morning to watch us recording it. This is actually going to go on to our respective YouTube channels at the NRLA and also at Property Tribes, so you will be able to review it. Sadly, you won't be in it because we've only had one camera facing in this direction, but we're very, very grateful for you coming down this morning and joining us, and we hope you've got value from the discussion. And Ben, thank you very much to you as always. I don't know when our next one is.
Well, we'll have to get it in the diary, my darling, because it's good fun, I think.
It is. We do enjoy it, don't we? Yes. And we always chew the cud on everything, and we always try and come out with something positive, don't we? Because there's a lot of negativity around for landlords at the moment, and I think that one of the most wonderful things about being a property investor is that wherever there's, a dark cloud, there's always a silver lining. And if we look hard enough, we can see that.
Indeed, find our pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You know, I'm very much a glass half full kind of person. I know the chips are down at the moment, but you know, I still believe that there are still rewards to be had in this industry. So if you want to go and find them, by all means, they're out there.
They're out there, and they're actually out that door. So go and enjoy the show, everybody, and thank you very much for this morning.